Queen's belief. The alien queen sat on her golden throne, her eyes sharp like blades. Around her stood her guards, tall warriors with shining armor, their heads bowed low. The throne room was silent, but everyone knew one thing. When the queen spoke, her words carried weight heavier than any weapon. She was feared across the galaxy. Planets bent to her will, and leaders from other races lowered their heads in her presence. Her power was not only her army, but also her pride. And above all things, the queen carried a belief that was carved deep into her heart. Humans were weak. Whenever the name human came to her ears, she laughed. To her, they were fragile creatures, soft in body, soft in mind. They did not have claws or scales or thick armor like her warriors. Their lifespan was short, their weapons were primitive, and their emotions made them foolish. She often told her council, "Humans are like dry leaves in the wind. One strike and they crumble to dust." Her generals laughed with her. No one dared to question her. But deep in the shadows, whispers spread. Some alien scouts returned with strange tales. They spoke of humans fighting with impossible courage. They told of battles where humans stood against stronger enemies and refused to surrender, even when death was certain. But whenever such reports reached the queen, she brushed them aside. "Stories," she said, "just stories. Lies told to cover the shame of those who lost to a weak race." On this day, however, a messenger rushed into the throne room, panting, his armor scratched and his face pale. He dropped to one knee and held out a glowing tablet. "My queen," he said, his voice shaking, "there is a human on the battlefield." The queen narrowed her eyes. "A human?" she repeated, her tone filled with mockery. "And why should I care? Has my army grown so lazy that you bring me tales of in-sea?" The messenger's voice quivered. "He does not fight like the others. He stands alone. Our soldiers surround him, yet he does not fall." The queen's lips curved into a cold smile. "Then I will watch. Let me see this insect dance before he dies." The throne room darkened as a massive screen lit up, showing the battlefield far away. Dust rose in clouds, and the sound of clashing weapons echoed. Alien soldiers circled a single figure, and there, in the middle of it all, stood the human. He was not wearing shining armor. His clothes were torn, his weapon was old, and his body was bleeding. Yet he stood tall, his back straight, his eyes burning like fire. Each time a soldier rushed at him, he moved with speed, dodging, striking, and standing his ground. The queen leaned forward on her throne. "Interesting," she whispered. Her council members shifted nervously. They too had believed humans were weak, but this one man, he fought differently. His face showed no fear, no hesitation. Even wounded, he refused to kneel. The queen's pride, however, was stronger than her doubt. She laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the silence of the chamber. "One stubborn fool does not change what humans are. Let him fight, let him bleed. Soon he will collapse like all the rest." But inside her chest, a small spark of unease flickered. The battle grew fiercer. The human roared as he pushed back two soldiers at once. His weapon struck with precision, his movements fueled by something more than strength. He fought not only with his body, but with his spirit. The queen felt her heart beat faster. She hated it. For the first time in years, her belief wavered. She clenched her hand into a fist. "Send more soldiers," she ordered. "Crush him. I will not allow a human to defy me." The messenger bowed and hurried out. The queen turned back to the screen, her eyes locked on the lone warrior. For the first time in her reign, the queen's laughter sounded hollow. She told herself humans were weak, but as she watched, a question formed in her mind. One she refused to say aloud. "What if I am wrong?" The queen's belief was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. The first clash. The battlefield was a storm of dust and steel. Alien drums pounded like thunder in the distance, calling more soldiers to the fight. The ground shook beneath heavy boots, and the air was thick with war cries. In the middle of that chaos stood one man, one human, his chest rising and falling with ragged breath, yet his stance unbroken. From her throne room, the queen watched every move. Her eyes were sharp, following the human's figure on the great screen. The council sat stiff around her, their faces tense. For the first time, silence hung heavy among them. The alien commander on the field raised his claw and gave the signal. 10 warriors, bigger and stronger than the first wave, surrounded the human in a tight circle. Their blades gleamed under the burning sky. The human gripped his weapon tighter. His arm was bleeding, his clothes torn, but his eyes burned with something the queen could not name. Was it defiance? Was it madness? Or was it courage beyond reason? The first soldier lunged, swinging hard. The human sidestepped and slammed the hilt of his weapon into the soldier's jaw, sending the creature sprawling into the dust. Gasps rose from the alien ranks. No one expected a human to strike with such speed. The second came from behind, but the human twisted, blocking with his arm and driving his knee into the soldier's stomach. A third attacked, blade raised high, but the human ducked low and countered with a sharp upward strike. 3 enemies down. The queen leaned forward on her throne, her lips parting slightly. "Impossible," she whispered. Her council dared not speak, but in their hearts doubt began to spread. The battle raged on. More soldiers charged, their weapons flashing, their voices roaring, yet the human fought like a cornered beast. He was outnumbered, yet every strike of his blade carried the weight of survival. His body moved not with training alone, but with desperation, instinct, and something deeper. The alien commander shouted angrily, "Crush him! He is only one man!" But even as 10 more soldiers joined, the human refused to fall. His movements were not perfect. He stumbled, he bled, but each time he rose again, stronger than before. His face twisted with pain, but his spirit only grew fiercer. The queen clenched her jaw. Every part of her screamed to dismiss this as luck, as chance. Yet her heart beat faster, betraying her calm mask. She could not look away. On the screen, one of her elite guards entered the fight. This warrior was taller, armored in black steel, his weapon twice the size of the human's. The ground trembled as he stepped forward, his shadow covering the human. The queen's lips curved. "Now it ends," she said, though her voice carried less confidence than before. The clash was brutal. The guard swung his heavy blade, and the human barely dodged, the strike carving deep into the earth. The guard attacked again and again, each swing powerful enough to kill in one blow. The human blocked, staggered, and rolled aside, but he refused to retreat. Minutes passed. Sweat and blood covered the human's face. His breath came heavy, yet his eyes still burned. At last, when the guard raised his weapon high for a killing strike, the human rushed forward instead of stepping back. Gasps filled the throne room. The human ducked under the swing, slamming his shoulder into the guard's chest with full force. The alien stumbled, caught off balance, and in that single heartbeat, the human drove his blade upward, piercing through the guard's armor. The black-armored warrior fell to the ground with a heavy crash. The battlefield froze. The alien soldiers stared in disbelief. The air was filled with silence so deep that even the queen's heart skipped a beat. The human stood tall above the fallen. Guard, blood dripping from his weapon, his chest heaving. He raised his eyes toward the rest of the army. There was no fear in them, only fire. A murmur spread through the alien ranks. Soldiers who once mocked now hesitated. Some stepped back. Some lowered their weapons ever so slightly. The queen's nails dug into her throne. Her pride burned hotter than her anger. She wanted to scream, to deny what her eyes had seen. But the truth was clear. One human, just one, had defeated her elite guard in front of thousands. She forced herself to speak, her voice sharp as glass. "Do not falter. He is still a human. Finish him." Her words echoed across the command channel, but they carried less power now. The soldiers obeyed, but their hearts wavered. The queen leaned back, her mind in turmoil. For years she had believed humans were weak. For years she had laughed at them. But now, as she watched the bloodied warrior stand unbroken, a question clawed at her pride. What drives him to fight like this? The battle was far from over, but already the queen felt a crack in the wall of her belief. And once a crack appears, it can never be unseen. The hidden strength. The battlefield was littered with dust, smoke, and broken weapons. Alien soldiers stood frozen, their eyes wide as they watched the human warrior. His chest rose and fell heavily. His clothes were torn. Blood dripped from his arms, yet his back was still straight. He looked more like a wild flame than a dying man. From her throne room, the alien queen's lips were pressed tightly together. She hated what she saw. The human should have fallen long ago, yet he refused to bow. His spirit burned brighter with every strike, and even her soldiers, loyal and fierce, began to hesitate. "Why does he not fall?" she whispered under her breath. Her generals shifted uncomfortably, but none dared to answer. They too had believed. Humans were weak. But this one man, this stubborn creature, was destroying that belief in front of their eyes. On the field, the alien commander roared orders. "Forward! Do not fear him. He is only flesh and bone." But the soldiers did fear him. They had seen their strongest warrior fall. They had seen courage that defied reason. Still, duty drove them, and with loud cries they charged again. The human tightened his grip on his weapon. His arms trembled, but his eyes did not. The soldiers rushed at him, one from the front, two from the sides. He twisted, blocked, and struck, his blade slicing the air with precision. One soldier screamed as steel met flesh. Another staggered back with a broken weapon. The third landed a blow on the human's shoulder. Blood sprayed, and the man stumbled. Gasps filled the alien ranks. The Queen's eyes lit up with cruel hope. "Yes," she murmured, "now he will fall." But he did not. The human gritted his teeth, his jaw tight with pain. For a moment, his body swayed like a tree in a storm. But then he straightened, his eyes burning hotter than ever. With a sudden roar, he swung his weapon, knocking the soldier flat on the ground. The Queen's heart skipped. She felt it again, the unease, the tiny fear she tried to bury. This human was not fighting with his body alone. His wounds should have stopped him. His strength should have left him. Yet something unseen pushed him forward. It was not muscle. It was not weapon. It was spirit. The Queen leaned forward, her nails digging into her throne. She whispered the word like a curse. Spirit. On the battlefield, the human's movements grew faster. His strikes carried fury, but not blind rage. There was purpose in each blow. He fought as though every strike was for something greater than himself. And in truth, it was. In his mind, he saw faces. Faces of his people. Faces of those who could know each fight, who depended on him. He saw his home far away, fragile yet unbroken. He heard voices telling him to rise, to endure, to stand when no one else could. And so he did. The alien soldiers faltered. Every step they took forward, he pushed them 2 steps back. Every wound they gave him, he answered with strength they could not understand. The Queen slammed her fist against the arm of her throne. "Enough! Send more! Do not let him breathe!" More troops entered the field, their weapons glowing, their eyes fixed with forced determination. But as they drew closer, they felt it, the invisible weight of his presence. He was one man, yet he stood like a wall against a river. The clash shook the battlefield again. Metal struck metal, cries filled the air, dust rose in clouds. The human was swallowed by the mass of soldiers, blades flashing from all sides. The Queen sat tall, watching closely, waiting for the moment when he would disappear forever. But then the dust cleared. And there he was, still standing. His body was drenched in blood, his legs shaking, but his weapon was raised. Around him lay fallen soldiers, groaning in pain, their weapons scattered on the ground. The Queen's eyes widened, her heart pounded faster than she wanted to admit. Her generals whispered to each other, voices low and uneasy. "How can this be?" one muttered. "No one should fight like that. No one should still be alive." Another whispered, Maybe the stories were true." The Queen shot them a glare, silencing them instantly. But inside, her own thoughts echoed the same. Maybe the stories were true. Maybe humans were not weak. The human lifted his face toward the sky, breathing heavily. For a moment, he closed his eyes. The Queen expected him to fall then and there. Instead, when his eyes opened again, the fire inside them burned brighter than before. He raised his weapon, pointing it toward the alien army. His voice rang out, raw but unshaken. "I will not fall, not today." His words carried across the battlefield. The aliens froze. They understood little of his tongue, but they felt the power in his voice. It was not just sound, it was a promise, a vow that shook them to their core. In her throne room, the Queen's chest tightened. She had always believed strength was in power, in armies, in weapons, but as she watched that single human defy her entire force, she realized there was another kind of strength, one her people did not understand, the hidden strength of humanity. The Queen gritted her teeth, anger rising to hide her fear. "This battle is not over," she hissed. "He will break. He must break." But in the silence that followed, even she did not believe her own words. The turning point. The battlefield had turned into a graveyard of broken weapons and fallen warriors. Dust hung in the air like a curtain, hiding the trembling faces of the alien soldiers. Somewhere in the middle of that chaos stood the human, wounded and bleeding, yet unyielding. His chest rose and fell with ragged breath, his weapon heavy in his hand, but his eyes still burned with that same unstoppable fire. From her throne room, the queen's fury boiled. She had sent wave after wave, and still the human stood. Pride screamed inside her, demanding she crush him with her own hands. Yet, a quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered the truth she hated. If her soldiers could not defeat him, perhaps only she could. She rose from her throne. The council gasped. It had been years since the queen herself had stepped onto a battlefield. Her power was legendary, her name feared. To see her fight was to witness the storm itself. "I will end this with my own hands," she declared. Her voice shook the walls, filled with both rage and wounded pride. Moments later, the queen appeared on the battlefield. The alien soldiers parted instantly, bowing low, their eyes wide. The human lifted his head, his vision blurred from exhaustion. Yet when he saw her, his grip on his weapon tightened. The queen stood tall, her dark armor gleaming under the pale light of the battlefield sky. Her crown shimmered, and her long cloak swirled like a shadow behind her. She gazed at the human with cold eyes, filled with contempt. "You have entertained me enough," she said, "but your defiance ends now." The human said nothing. He only raised his weapon, his body shaking but his spirit firm. Then, the battle began. The queen struck first, her blade flashing with alien energy. The ground cracked beneath her strike, the shockwave sending dust flying in every direction. The human barely dodged, rolling to the side, his body aching with pain. Again she attacked, each swing faster and stronger. The sound of metal rang across the battlefield as their weapons clashed. Sparks lit the air, and soldiers watched in stunned silence. The queen fought with the strength of 100 warriors. Every strike carried the weight of her pride. The human, broken and bleeding, should have fallen. But somehow each time she struck, he found the strength to rise again. At one point, her blade slashed across his arm. Blood spilled, his weapon nearly fell. She smirked, ready to finish him, but then something unexpected happened. The human, instead of retreating, stepped forward. Her eyes widened as his body slammed into hers, his weapon clashing against her own. For the first time, she felt resistance that was not just physical. It was his will pressing against hers. The human staggered, almost falling, but in that moment, he saw something on the ground. One of her alien guards lay injured, unable to move, fear in his eyes. Another soldier raised a blade, ready to finish the fallen guard. The human did something unthinkable. Instead of attacking the queen, he turned, shielding the alien guard with his own body. He raised his weapon and blocked the killing strike meant for his enemy. The force sent him to his knees, but the guard's life was spared. Gasps erupted from the watching soldiers. The queen froze, disbelief flashing across her face. Why? Why would an enemy protect one of her own? The human's voice was hoarse but clear. "Even your soldiers, they are lives. I will not kill for nothing." The queen's heart jolted. For the first time, she felt something other than anger in her chest, confusion, almost admiration, though she would never admit it aloud. Her soldiers murmured among themselves. Some looked at the human, not with hatred, but with awe. The man they fought to kill had just saved one of their own. The queen's grip on her blade tightened. This was dangerous, more dangerous than his strength, his mercy, his compassion. It could shatter her control. If her soldiers began to respect him, her power over them would crumble. "No," she roared, shaking away the thought. "He is a trickster. Do not believe his lies." She rushed forward, her blade glowing with deadly energy, striking with all her might. The human blocked, barely, the impact throwing him back. His body was failing, but his spirit still refused to die. The soldiers watched in silence, their loyalty shaken. For years they had believed humans were weak, but before them stood proof of something else. Not just strength, but a courage that even their queen could not break. The queen's strikes grew desperate. She needed to end this quickly, before her soldiers' hearts turned. But the more she fought, the more she felt it. Her power could not crush his will. His eyes burned with the fire of something she had never faced before. Hope. At last, they clashed again, weapons locked, their faces inches apart. The queen hissed, "Why do you keep standing? You should have fallen long ago." The human's answer was simple, yet it cut deeper than any blade. "Because I fight not for myself, but for all who cannot." Her heart trembled. For the first time in her reign, the queen felt her pride break. Around the HFY, the battlefield was silent. Soldiers watched, breaths held, knowing they had just witnessed something far greater than a simple clash of blades. This was no longer just a battle. It was the turning point. The human spirit. The battlefield had grown silent, though swords still gleamed and dust still hung in the air. Every soldier, every guard, every eye was fixed on one thing: the human. He stood half-broken, his body shaking, his wounds bleeding. His breath came in ragged gasps, but his hands did not let go of his weapon. The alien queen, her blade glowing with alien power, stared at him with fury. Yet beneath that fury was something else she had never felt before: unease. This was supposed to be over. A human should have fallen long ago, yet he did not. The queen raised her blade again, her pride forcing her forward. She swung, fast and heavy, sparks flying as metal clashed. The human staggered, his knees nearly buckling, but still he stood. Each strike from the queen was stronger than any soldier's, yet the human blocked, dodged, or took the blow and rose again. The soldiers watching felt their hearts race. Their queen was a storm, unstoppable, merciless. But somehow this fragile creature did not crumble under her fury. The human's voice broke through the silence, hoarse yet steady. "You fight with power," he said between breaths, "but I fight with something greater." The queen snarled. "Greater? You are covered in blood. You are weak. You are nothing." But her words trembled, for deep inside she feared he was right. The human closed his eyes for a brief moment. In that heartbeat, memories filled him. He saw his village, burned by alien fire. He saw faces of people who had no weapons, no strength, only fear. He heard the cries of children, the voices of the helpless who depended on someone, anyone, to stand. And then he opened his eyes. What burned there was not the strength of his body, but the strength of his spirit. With a roar that echoed across the battlefield, he charged forward. His blade clashed with hers, sparks dancing between them. Though his wounds slowed him, his will carried him. His strikes grew heavier, faster, filled not with rage but with unshakable purpose. The queen staggered, her eyes widening. For the first time in her life she felt pushed back. Her soldiers gasped. "The queen, she steps back!" The queen gritted her teeth, fury burning her pride. "You are only human," she shouted. The man's voice answered, strong despite the pain. "Yes, I am human, and that is enough." His words cut through the silence, carried on the wind. The soldiers heard them, and their hearts stirred. For so long they believed humans were fragile, useless, weak. But this one man proved something else. That humans carried a strength no one could measure, a fire no one could kill. The queen's strikes grew wilder. She needed to silence him, to crush this spirit before it spread through her army like wildfire. But every clash, every block, every push showed her the truth. Her power could wound his flesh, but not his will. She struck his chest and he stumbled. She struck his side and he bled. She struck his shoulder and his arm trembled. Yet each time he rose again, his eyes never losing their fire. The soldiers could no longer stay silent. Whispers spread like sparks in dry grass. He does not fall. He fights for more than himself. Is this the strength of a human? The queen roared to silence them, but even she could feel it. Her grip on their hearts was slipping. The human raised his weapon high and shouted once more, "I fight not for glory, I fight not for power, I fight for life, for those who cannot fight themselves." The words struck the queen harder than any blade. She faltered for a single moment, her pride cracking. She saw in his eyes something she had never known, a spirit that no army, no empire, no crown could command. Her blade wavered. The human advanced, step by step, his body bleeding but his soul unbroken. Each strike he made forced her back. Each word he spoke broke her belief. "You call me weak," he said. He had taken every strike, endured every wound, and still rose to fight again. What keeps him alive, she wondered. What power burns inside him that my kind does not have? Her generals surrounded her, their voices desperate. "Majesty, let us retreat and rebuild. Majesty, send the rest of the legions. End him now before his story spreads. Majesty, he is only one man. He cannot truly matter." But their words rang hollow. Even the generals did not believe their own voices. The queen could see the truth in their eyes. They feared him. For the first time in her reign, the queen realized she could not rely on her army's faith. They would march if she ordered it, but their courage was broken. They no longer believed themselves unstoppable. She rose from her chariot, her long cloak billowing in the wind. Silence fell as the soldiers turned to her. Her silver crown glimmered in the fading sun. "I will go," she said. The words stunned everyone. Her generals gasped. "Majesty, no! You cannot face him yourself. You are the queen." But her voice was sharp as a blade. "I must see him with my own eyes. I must know what makes him rise again and again." Her soldiers dared not argue further. They stepped aside as she descended from her chariot. Each step she took was heavy, not from fear, but from the weight of something unfamiliar pressing against her pride. Doubt. She crossed the field slowly, her tall form moving through the wreckage of her army. The human stood waiting, his blade still in hand, his eyes locked on her. He did not tremble, even as the queen of an empire walked toward him. When she stopped only a few steps away, silence hung between them. The river roared behind him, but between them there was only stillness. The queen studied him closely. His face was scarred, his body battered, but his eyes, those eyes burned like stars. There was no fear in them, no mission. Only calm strength. At last she spoke. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Why do you not kneel? Why do you not break?" The human's reply was steady, simple, and sharp. "Because I fight for more than myself." The queen tilted her head, confused. "For your people? For my people, for my family, for the memory of those who fell before me, for the hope of those who will come after me. That is why I stand." The words struck her deeper than any blade could. She had ruled her empire with fear, with control, with chains of obedience. But this man fought with love, with loyalty, with something invisible yet unbreakable. For the first time, the queen's heart trembled. She had mocked humans all her life, yet here stood proof that their strength was not weakness at all. It was something her kind could never create. She felt anger rise in her chest, but it was not anger at him. It was anger at herself, for being blind, for refusing to see. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "Do you not fear death?" she asked. The human shook his head. "Death comes for all, but if I fall protecting what I love, then I have already won." Her breath caught. Those words pierced her pride, shattering the last wall inside her heart. All her victories, all her conquests, all her power suddenly felt empty. The queen looked back at her soldiers. They were watching in silence, waiting for her command. For years, they had obeyed her because of fear, yet none of them would fight with the fire this one human carried inside. She turned back to him. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had never allowed herself to feel. Respect, and along with it, something even more dangerous. A question. Have I been wrong all along? The queen's awakening was not complete, but the seed had been planted. Her pride was cracking, and through the cracks, truth was beginning to shine. She stepped back slowly, her voice carrying across the field. "Enough. This battle ends here." Her soldiers looked at one another in confusion. The human's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "Human," he said simply. The word struck harder than any weapon. The queen staggered back, her chest heaving. Her soldiers stared, waiting for her to deny it, to roar, to command them once more. But she could not, because deep inside, she knew the truth. She had lost, not because of his weapon, but because of what he carried in his soul. Slowly, her fingers loosened around her blade. It slipped from her hand and hit the ground with a heavy clang. Gasps filled the battlefield. The queen of steel and fire, the ruler of countless worlds, had dropped her weapon before a single human. Her pride shattered, but in that shattering came clarity. She whispered, so soft only she could hear it, "I was wrong." The human lowered his weapon, his chest rising and falling. He did not strike. He did not take advantage of her weakness. He simply stood, waiting. That mercy, again, cut deeper than any blow. The queen turned her gaze to her soldiers. Their eyes were no longer on her with fear, but on him with awe. She knew then that everything had changed. Her rule, her power, her pride. It all meant nothing in front of the truth of his spirit. She straightened, her voice carrying across the field. "This battle is over." Shock spread through the army. No one had ever heard her speak those words. The queen's realization had broken her chains of arrogance. She no longer saw a fragile race. She saw the truth of humanity, a strength that could not be crushed. But though she had spoken the words, her heart still trembled. She knew this moment was not only an end, it was the beginning of something greater, something that would shake the galaxy, the battle that changed everything. The clang of the Queen's fallen blade echoed across the battlefield like a thunderclap. Every soldier froze, their eyes wide, their voices caught in their throat. For the first time in history, their queen, the unshakable, the undefeated, had lowered her weapon. Dust drifted in the silent air, smoke curled from shattered weapons, and the smell of iron blood lingered. Yet all eyes were locked on two figures, the human, wounded but unbroken, and the queen, standing tall yet shaken to her core. The human's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His body swayed from exhaustion, but his spirit held him upright. His weapon was still in his hand, though he no longer raised it to strike. He simply waited, his eyes fixed on the queen, not with hatred, but with calm defiance. The queen's throat tightened. For years she had believed fear was strength. For years she had ruled through terror. But now she saw the truth staring at her, bleeding, battered, yet proud. This man had no crown, no army, no throne, and yet he had defeated her. Not with power, not with cruelty, but with spirit. The alien soldiers shifted uneasily. They had always thought humans were weak, but here was one who had shattered that lie before their eyes. Some lowered their weapons, others fell to their knees, unable to process what they had witnessed. The queen finally spoke, her voice softer than anyone had ever heard. "You should hate me," she said. "You should strike me down." The human shook his head slowly. "I am not here to hate," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I am here to stand." Her chest trembled. Mercy again. She had expected him to kill her, to take his revenge. Instead, he gave her something she had never offered anyone: choice. Her soldiers whispered louder now, their voices carrying through the field. "He is stronger than any of us. He should have died, yet he stands. Humans, they are not weak." The queen raised her eyes to her people. For the first time, she saw doubt not as a threat, but as a mirror. They no longer looked to her for power. They looked to him for strength. It was then she understood. If she killed him now, her people would never forget. His spirit would live on as a legend, stronger than her throne. But if she bowed, if she admitted the truth, maybe, just maybe, the galaxy would change. Her pride screamed against it, but her heart whispered something new. Slowly, she sank to one knee, her head lowered before the human. Gasps erupted like fire across the field. The queen of 1,000 worlds bowed, not to a conqueror, not to a king, but to a single human warrior. "This day," she said, her voice trembling yet clear, "the galaxy learns the truth. Humans are not weak. They are the strongest of us all." The human's grip tightened on his weapon. He had never imagined this moment. A queen, a ruler feared across the stars, bowing before him. But he did not lift his blade. Instead, he extended his hand. The queen hesitated. Then slowly she placed her hand in his. He pulled her to her feet, his strength surprising her even in his broken state. A roar erupted from the soldiers. Some cheered, some wept, others dropped their weapons entirely. The battlefield was no longer a place of war. It had become a place of history. The queen stood beside the human, her pride shattered but her heart open. She looked at her army and raised her voice. "From this day forward, humans are no longer prey. They are no longer weak. They are our equals." The words rippled through the ranks like fire through dry grass. The soldiers, once filled with doubt, now shouted in unison. A new respect was born, not just for the human before them, but for all of his kind. The human turned his gaze to the horizon, his chest heavy with exhaustion. He had not fought for glory. He had not fought for thrones. He had fought because he had no other choice. To stand when no one else could. And in standing, he had changed everything. The queen looked at him one last time, her eyes no longer filled with contempt, but with something else, respect. "You are more than I believed," she whispered. The human gave a faint smile. "No, I am simply human." But those words carried across the battlefield like a banner. Soldiers repeated them, generals whispered them, and soon the galaxy itself would remember them. That day was marked in history, not as the fall of a queen, not as the victory of a soldier, but as the moment the galaxy learned the truth about humanity. It was the battle that changed everything.